let's look at one of my favorite moves to use in sparring. I always urge my students to use this one, and this may surprise you because you've probably never seen my students finish someone with it. This brings in the idea that there's more than one way to use submission holds. People think of submission holds just as a way to finish a match. But there's a second use of submission holds as a tactical means of intimidation to get opponents moving around the mat in directions you want them to move and go into other submissions. Gatame, the straight arm lock with pressure down on an extended arm, is a classic example of a submission hold that can work well as a straight up submission to finish a match, and our primary use of it is to intimidate people to generate motion into other forms of submission. So let's just have a look at the basic Gatame, because you've got to have a strong threat on your opponent to make him want to move, to get away from it, and then look at some ways we can use that to set up other forms of holds. One common thread in all Gatame is that, especially when it's done from bottom position, is that it does require us to go under an opponent's arm. Okay, there are a few variations that begin with overhooks, but at some point you've got to get through underneath your opponent's arm. That doesn't really change. Okay, now an obvious question here is, if your opponent has any kind of skill, he's not going to just give you open elbows and start giving you things for free. So we're going to look at the idea of working with an opponent who has good elbow position. He's not some sucker whose arms are extended out here and we just go straight into the move. This guy's a good man and his elbows are in close. So how are we going to get our hand underneath his? We're going to start by putting a hand in here as a collar tie, and we're going to turn our second hand pinky knuckle up, just like this. Off that pinky knuckle up position, we're going to go good pull on our training partner's head, and as a result we go right through. Okay, if my opponent closes his elbows and I just try to dig in, you're never going to get on a good player. Okay, but if I move the head simultaneously and come in, it comes in very nicely and very easily. Now I don't want to let go of the head too quickly. Craig Jones will quickly posture up in this situation, posturing upgrade, and from here his elbow will always come inside my elbow and we'll lose the position. So let's make sure that once we get the head, we stay on the head long enough to bring it down to the floor and we're on our side. The key element is that I have one knee in front of Craig's right shoulder and one knee behind his left shoulder. This creates a situation where his head and one arm are trapped between my knees. If he tries to drive forward, my left knee makes it very difficult. If he tries to pull away, my right knee makes it very difficult. Now we're going to take his elbow all the way up north, trapped between my shoulder and my jaw. Now this is where things get interesting. This whole battle now is a battle for head height. If Craig Jones' head rises, he can turn his elbow back inside and escape. So our whole thing is how to keep the head down. And the key is this knee. We lock it in. We avoid the temptation to start throwing legs across the body. We keep the lower leg short and the knee right behind his shoulder. I take my elbow to his elbow and I point my elbow forwards. If my elbow points at the ceiling, his head can rise very easily and he escapes. That's probably the number one cause of escape to this particular lock, the Gatame. So we take our elbow and we point it forwards towards our training partner's ear. Now when Craig tries to bring the head up, his own elbow will prevent him. I reinforce my elbow position by holding the elbow. Try to avoid a commonly seen thing where you lock palm to palm. Now Craig's head rises easily, the elbow goes inside, it's pretty easy to escape. So let's make sure we stay elbow to elbow and lock on board. Now, breaking mechanics. If you just try to crush down on the elbow and you've got a strong, flexible opponent, it's hard to get a break here. The true breaking mechanics to an Gatame involve my head going towards his head and my hips going away from his hips. It's not just the pushing down of my arms. That's not going to work at World Championship level where people are willing to take pretty serious damage. Instead, we're going to take my head moving in towards his head and my hips moving away. And it's from there that we get genuine breaking pressure. Why? Because we're incorporating the whole body into the break. We're not just squeezing with our arms, it's the whole body moving in for a strong break. So one more time. We're here. We need inside underneath position with our arms. How are we going to get that on a good man? We're going to take collar tie, punch through, and get our underhook. We're going to bring the head down to the mat, and we're going to shimmy out so we get our knees pinched around his head and one arm. We're going to transfer everything up to the collarbones, and we're going to focus on pointing the elbows forwards, never upwards. And as a result, we get control of his head, the single most important element here. If the head rises, we're lost. But if we can keep the head down, you can beat a lot of people with this position. Now, from here, go to finish things, I often bring my knee inside the shoulder, so there's a transfer from one shoulder across to the other, and then everything moves towards him with the head and away from him with the hips. And that's where we get strong breaking pressure. Okay, this is Gatame. Of all the submission holds in the sport of Jiu-Jitsu, I would say Gatame is the fastest in application. It often involves a quick underhook entry and then pressure on your opponent's arm. Even if you don't score the hold, you sure as hell scare the crap out of your opponents. And pretty soon they start playing with short arms. Their retracted arms makes it a lot easier for me to come up from bottom position and start scoring all kinds of positional reversals, etc., etc. It's a great way not only to finish your opponent, but also intimidate them from bottom position and generate much easier movement for you as the bottom player.
Alright guys, so we're going to attack a straight ankle lock. Right? So I'm going to grab Bernardo's left leg here. And we'll just run through the finish from bottom here, right? So I remember when I first started doing the straight ankle lock, I used to think that I had to be flat on my back, really arching the ankle and trying to explode my hips through the top. But I found very little success, and especially against bigger, stronger opponents, I found it very difficult to get the tap. And I think that's because I was focusing on trying to extend the ankle this way. But actually, if we can create a nice curve to the toes, we can apply a pressure that feels more similar to a toe hold. So the way I achieve that is I come in deep on Bernardo, and the grip I take is going to be my thumb just below the Achilles here. So I'm not going to reach too deep initially, but I'm just going to place my thumb below the Achilles and place my hand on my rib cage below my left back. I'm going to sit in nice and tight against Bernardo here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to walk my elbow backwards behind me, circling back towards Bernardo's other leg. And as I do that, I bring my elbow closer and closer against my body. And hopefully I can start to turn Bernardo's foot as if it was a toe hold. So we start to walk his toes back in all the way until we get to the shoulder here. Once we're on the shoulder, I can start to look over my left shoulder and apply a little bit of hip extension. And I find I get a much quicker tap than had I tried to finish it straight on my back, trying to really curve his foot. So again, I take a shallow grip here. So my thumb just below the Achilles, I'm not reaching elbow deep. I'm trying to sit in nice and close to Bernardo and get a nice bend in his leg here. And I initially start on the tip of my elbow, and I turn out and I start to walk my elbow backwards until I can get my shoulder on the mat. And I pull my elbow really tight and start to extend over my left shoulder. And we can get a nice tap on that ankle there.
This is point 2. We're calling an octopus guard. Across the board, I don't want you to think of it as a guard. It's not a guard, it's not a closed guard, it's not a half guard. It is a position that we are moving at all times. We're hitting tipping points, tilting points, we're making them chase us and onto us, shoot for submissions and pins that aren't really there. So again, although we're calling it Octopus Guard 2.0, try not to think of it as a guard, think of it as an ongoing scramble. That is a problem that is hard for them to solve, and we're going to have sort of answers for all the options and all the risks we take along the way.